Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Writers Hub series here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a returning Wandering Scribe alumni. Now, many of you remember this guest. She is the author of the incredible children's book series, which I am so excited to talk about again for this topic because this is a very, very personal one and one that was mentioned briefly in her interview not too long ago. She's an incredible person, amazing individual, and I think a lot of people, especially parents and families who watch this episode in particular, are going to get a lot of information out of this. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, my good friend and returning author, Marteena Drinnen. Marteena, welcome back to the show.
I'm so happy to be back. Very excited for today.
Absolutely, Marteena. Absolutely. And again, I am so excited to have you here back on the show because this topic I think is very important now more than ever. And it is, of course, literacy, children's books, and media. And this is a very, very loaded topic, ladies and gentlemen, because this is very, very prevalent in today's culture now more than ever. Now, before we dive into the questions, Marteena, I was wondering if you can give us almost like a little stepping stone, so to speak, as not only you're an author, but you are also a parent as well. And from your own perspective on this issue of literacy and digital media and how that can negatively impact children's reading.
Absolutely. So I'm a mom of a little 2-year-old. Will be 3 soon. Time is flying fast. Um, so we have always been focused on reading and establishing literacy early on with our little one. Um, a huge problem, especially in our area of East Tennessee, is literacy. And with social media and with all the media that we have, which it's a great tool, and I know we'll probably talk more about that later,
Mm-hmm.
but negative wise, being so much on like iPads and screens and all this other stuff, it gives that instant gratification that children love. I mean, as we do, we as
Yep.
adults, we love to do the easy thing first, because it just gives us that drive, like, ooh, I did something today. But when it comes to literacy and reading, it requires us to slow down. And in our current like climate, we're always rushing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is very, very true. And as a tutor who works with children to help with their literacy, this is something that is very, very prevalent. And, it does also impact us as authors because for some of us, and we actually mentioned this in your interview not too long ago, how a goal for a lot of authors, especially those that write for children, is to help with literacy. They want to write the book that gets them into reading. So, as a
Hmm.
stepping stone, Marteena, how do you think the abundance of media options affects the way children engage with books?
I think so. The easier like answer that I think a lot of people immediately go for is media is bad. We have the social media, we have the iPads, we have all of this stuff, and so much of it's bad. It's all garbage. We should just throw them into the ocean and go back to the way things were. I will not take that stance. When I was growing up, I learned how to read using the Abeka program. So it was a homeschooling. It is a Christian-based program, but there was many like it. And with that Abeka program came the CDs and came the books. And you would read along with the CD, and then they would
Hmm.
do the little test and yada yada yada. And then later on, if you remember the CD-ROMs with Reader Rabbit and
Oh
Blue's
my gosh!
Clues.
Oh, that's a flashback.
So we had that stuff growing up. It was just, I guess, easier. easily accessible to us in that sense of, you could go to the store, you could go buy a CD, and there was that safety because it was closed, right? It wasn't like a public thing, it was a closed forum. But now we have more open forums, right?
Hmm.
Like there's still a lot, and especially Abeka today. Abeka, you can download their stuff now versus when you just had the CD, because people don't really use CDs anymore. So it's a great thing that we have if we can use these things as tools.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Very, very true. And I even remember as a kid getting into reading, which we'll probably touch on a little bit later,
Mhm.
is for the uh what was it, the chapter 1 test, or like the AR test. The AR
Yes.
test that every kid remembers doing, those AR tests where you had to read the books and
Hmm.
get ready for the AR test to get your scores. And for me, for some books, I could not read fast enough. So I always listened to the audiobooks.
Hmm.
And almost like what you mentioned, Martina, listening to it is one thing, but I still read along with the book. I
Yeah.
would still read along with the story, which I think even now, even also seeing, adults when it comes to, for audiobooks. And again, we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but as a little introduction, which I've seen and probably you've seen as well, a lot of people will choose audiobooks over, either digital books or even physical copies. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's entitled to, their choice of preference. But I definitely think, and one of my friends has mentioned this, there was a fellow author, noticed that those that do choose audiobooks, in the very, very, very small percentile, choose it because they don't want to sit and read. It's too
Hmm.
long. It's not really fun. With an audiobook, you can listen on the go. Yes,
Yeah.
you're listening, but are you actually listening to the story?
Digesting. Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
very, very true. And kind of going into the next question, this is going to be more focused on to your series, the Tiny Tales series. When you were writing, these books, what unique challenges did you face when writing, these books, knowing full well that children nowadays are constantly surrounded by stimulating digital content?
So I could go on a whole tangent about this, but I will keep it. I will keep it as simple as I can. I was talking with my husband the other day, and we were just talking about, doing the whole old man, old lady thing. Back in my day, blah 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 blah. And even before us, I think we started hitting that stride even when we were in elementary school. School used to be learning with the Socratic method of having discussions. Now classroom sizes have gotten so big, right? I mean, having a discussion with 30 kids all at once, and that's 30 kids in one class. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I tried to do with my books, especially when I'm the one that's going to read to these kids, is I will stop in the middle of the story and I will start asking the kids for their feedback. What would you do in this situation?
Mm.
Why do you think he feels this way? And by doing that, you start getting that discussion again, because these kids, especially younger kids, they're in school all day long, having to sit down and listen to a teacher all day long in a classroom setting where everything is by the book. A lot of reasons why those with ADHD or ADD have issues in the classroom, they have to do something,
Yes.
right? And so it's breaking up the mundane. And I think
Mm.
that's a challenge, especially in my kind of books. So my books are written a little bit differently, where it's not really contemporary. Like my characters don't have iPhones or iPads or anything like that. It's supposed to have that old traditional feeling of the Berenstain Bears kind of
Yeah.
thing. But that is a challenge, is how do I get these kids' attention with that old style? And I think it's just the discussion. It depends on the person reading the story to them to make it or help it come alive for them.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes into the next question, which you kind of already answered, which is, as authors, no matter if you write for middle grade, which is children's, YA,
Mhm.
or adults, we often approach storytelling to make sure that it's captivating, but not overwhelming for the readers, especially, children in particular. And I
Mhm.
think if you look at, Bears Seen Bears, and what was another book that was really popular? It was like, I think Critters. It was like he was like a gerbil.
Critters. Mhm.
Yep, that was
Yep.
another book. The Rabbit brother and sister duo. For anyone who knows
Mhm.
that book series, kudos
Yes.
to you. That's another one. And it's just even going back, make it a little slight tangent, like shows of like the 90s and early 2000s. I actually was watching this a few nights ago. Was like the opening credits to some of these TV shows, and the one thing I noticed was it's just very calm. It's not
Mhm.
loud noises. It's not flashy. Case in
Mhm.
point, I remember the show very fondly. Oswald the Octopus.
Yes. I
That was
love
the
Oswald.
that was the most calmest, peaceful, opening to any kid show. I remember that so very fondly. And then Maggie and the mythical beast.
The
Oh,
ferocious beast.
ferocious beast.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, there was so much of these shows that, looking back on them, it's just so very different of
Mhm.
how they approached it. It wasn't very flashy. It wasn't very like bright, because even the colors now for like modern kids shows,
Oh
it's
yeah.
strikingly different. Like
It's everywhere.
it is. It is
Mhm.
so much. And I think also kind of ask this question when you're actually choosing the art style and sort of like the color palette for the Tiny Tales. In that regard, how did you make sure that it was not loud, so to speak, especially for young children reading it?
I think that's more of a question for my illustrator of like how she actually chose like the color patterns. The only thing I told her was I gave her references of, hey, this is what Bernstein Bears was. It was
Mm.
kind of muted colors. Well, like it was colorful, but it wasn't bright and in your face. And so she just kind of ran with that and she sent me a few things. And I mean, the first picture she ever showed me was the whole family together at the table. And I said, yep, nope, that's perfect. It gives off that vibe of just calmness. And hold on, let me see if I can find. There we go.
Oh
It just
yeah,
gives that calm. We're at home. We're relaxed. That kind of thing.
yeah. It's
Hmm.
very, again, very beautifully drawn
Thank
from your
you.
illustrator. I mean, it really does tell the story. And in your opinion, Martina, what makes a story, particularly a child story, stand out in a world full of fast-paced media now?
I think a good story is one that makes you think. I've always been that person. I like Hallmark movies during Christmas time. It's calm, it's fun, it's the same plot every single time. But I won't watch it through the rest of the year. Now that's my personal preference. But because I like stuff that makes me think. I liked the BBC Sherlock series.
Ooh, that
It
was a good
made
one.
me think. I was sitting there trying to dissect along with Sherlock. That's the kind of stuff that I like. So I think that's with any good story. Sometimes you can see the plot twist coming a mile away, and you're like, okay, sure. But if it forces you to think, and then it forces you to put yourself in there and say, what would I have done in that situation? Given all
Mhm.
of these other circumstances, how would I have gonna like done across that? And I think a really good indicator. So I growing up, we had the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he was great. When I was younger, I did not like it at all. I was like, he's a crybaby. She doesn't love him. How is he still this good guy when all these bad things are happening? But now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's what makes him the hero. Because all of these bad things are happening. I know I couldn't do what he does. So now it makes me think, and I'm like, okay, now I understand it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Very, very true. And I think that's a common thing that I found, especially, when looking back at these shows that all of us remember growing up, for those of like the 90s and early 2000s, that
Hmm.
we have one perspective of these shows when we're children, for, as the target audience of those shows back in the day. But when we look at those shows now, we get a fondness that's a little bit different. Another
Hmm.
case in point, another show that I found to be very, very helpful and also encourage my love of animals is Zaboomafoo by the Crafts Brothers.
Yes.
Love that.
Oh. Hmm. Yep.
And all of those shows were just so good. Like Roly Poly Oly and Peanut Butter
Hmm.
and Jelly and Bear in the Big Blue House. For anyone
My
who
son
remembers these
loved it.
shows,
Hmm.
they know like just how good these shows are. And now we're seeing, a trend with, people kind of realizing that, and we're going to touch on this later, that digital media, it can be a tool. It can be a tool if you use it correctly.
Hmm.
But if you use it as the end all be all, you're going to see striking changes and sometimes not for the best. And we're going to come back to that, especially when we look at the story of Toy Story 5, because it's a very, very, very important aspect when it comes to storytelling, especially for kids.
Hmm.
Now, for your books in particular, Martina, as I remember you said this, your books are, again, have that, homage to the Berenstein Bears and have a lot of important messages and themes that are grounded for children to understand, but it also respects their intelligence. It doesn't dumbs down their
Hmm.
intelligence, which I think most kid stories should aspire to do. So, when you were writing this series, how did you find the balance between, of course, entertaining kids, but also as an author, encouraging them to think critically about what they were reading? As you mentioned earlier, you would stop and then ask these very important questions to, force the children or to encourage the children to think critically on their own.
So I think I kind of saw entertainment as the second factor when I was writing these stories. I'm
Mm.
a teacher by heart. I've taught kids ministry for a long time, and then I was part of the youth ministry for an even longer time. So education has always been very, very important to me, and I try to never dumb down material because kids know when you're talking down to them. They
Mm.
just know it. It's you could try and come across as this nice person. It's like they can sniff out the genuineness. It's a
Yes,
superpower that kids have. So I never try to dumb things down. I try to challenge them, and that in itself becomes their critical thinking. And as you had mentioned before, when I go out and I do the school readings, I'm the one that's there stopping in between certain pages and being like, okay, now you. And it kind of catches them off guard, like, what do you mean? What, this isn't a yes or no question. I'm like, yes, it's not a yes or no. I want to know what you would do in this situation. So, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment. We, as the 90s kids, we grew up with the old school SpongeBob. There was
oh
nothing
yeah,
to learn from SpongeBob, but it was fun. So, there's nothing
yes,
wrong with it. But if we can only be in front of our kids for so long, when, especially in their formative years, when they're growing and they're learning how to become decent people and decent human beings, then we need to take that job seriously. And so that's what I try to do.
absolutely, absolutely. And also quote something that my mom has said. She was an educator for many, many years at my elementary school. Is that when we look at media and we give it to children at such a very, very young age to like begin reading, you're kind of taking a skill away. You're forcing them to do this. As I remember, she said specifically, like, you're taking away the crawl aspect of a child.
Mhm.
And for those that are watching this, and for those that are educators in the audience, you're going to know what I mean by that phrase is that children have, their own progressions. They have their own progressions that work for them. And when it comes down to literacy and reading, we expect them to be reading at the level that they are supposed to be. Now, for us, since we have worked in education, we know that's not always the case. There are children that are going to be significantly lower in their
Mhm.
literacy skills. And it's our job to help build up that skill, to read out loud, to make sure they understand, and to have that joy of reading, which I think is a very, very beautiful thing. And I think
Mhm.
specifically for authors who write for children, as you mentioned before, entertainment is secondary to the educational aspect because your books, correct me if I'm wrong, one of your books touches on a very personal discussion, which is like a new baby was going
Yes.
to be. Yes,
Mhm.
that's correct. And you don't shy away that, you look at it from the child's perspective. How does the child feel in this changing environment, and what are they thinking? And again, making that connection because there are probably kids who have felt that those
Mhm.
emotions as the characters in Tiny Tales, and kind of leading into that in the Tiny Tales series and possibly other books you have in the works, are there specific themes or messages you particularly focus on in your writing to counter the effects of overstimulation, even subtly?
So, so far, the first and the second book of the Tiny Tale series deals with fear. So the first one, as you mentioned, is dealing with the fear of a new sibling. And it's not necessarily I'm afraid of the new baby. It's more of I'm afraid of what that means for me.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a new baby in the family, everyone goes nuts. We got to get the baby room put together. We got to get this together. We have to get that together. We need the baby shower. Everything becomes the baby, the baby. And the older sibling or siblings start feeling left out. Well, what does this mean for me? I was the one getting all this attention, but now I have mom who's taking a nap on the couch. I have dad who's working overtime. Something's happening here, even if I can't express that. So that was the fear I focused on in the first book. And then the second one was more fear of the unknown.
Mm.
So that one was a little bit more, that one I think came more from me in my time with my son. I was rocking him one night, I'm praying over him, and then I just started crying because I realized I will not always be around to protect him, even though I want to be.
Mm.
So that's where that story kind of came out of. So it was through my fear, but from a child's perspective, they're not going to know, well, mommy's not always going to be here. They're just like, okay, well, tomorrow, daddy goes to work. So what does that mean for me? So
Right.
both were kind of dealing with fears. Um, sorry. I think the subtle approach, at least with the first two books, is the atmosphere that I put in. So, and I'll put the second one for this one. In this particular book, there we go. The atmosphere is calm. We're still at home. Mom's rocking and telling a story. So it's those kinds of scenarios that's like, hey, the calmness is what's bringing in the away from social media, away from all the chaos of the day, because inevitably that's what the screens do. They're
Yeah,
that constant running, 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 running. So we got to shut the brain off.
absolutely. Very, very true. And for this next question, which I think you may have touched on previously, as a parent, what role do you think parents and caregivers play in guiding children's reading habits in the digital age? And I ask this because I've seen a lot of this as an educator, working at different sites as a tutor, where some people just read when they just have a screen in front of them. There's no engagement of like, the
Mhm.
family involved, or like sitting, like habits. And I remember, me growing up, I loved, reading. My parents got me into reading. I remember I was reading with my mom, my dad growing up.
Hmm.
And then as I got older, still reading chapter books, I would also, listen with the chapter books on the audio with my parents, especially with the Redwall series. I loved reading those
Yes.
books. Those were so really good. So tying it back to the question, what do you think ultimately for parents now in this digital age, their role and sort of like their responsibility for guiding and establishing their child's reading habits in this new era?
I think it all boils down to, the saying that says, "Do what I say, not what I do."
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. If a parent is not going to put down their phone and pick up a book, your kid is not going to do the same. The phone is great. Again, it's wonderful. I have my Kindle on here. I have it for tools. I answer emails, all of that. But you know how it happens. I'm reading a chapter and then all of a sudden, oh, the husband calls me. Well, I got to answer that now. So it's like there's always the distraction right there in your hand.
Right.
If I think if we put the phones aside, whatever time it is at night, and then you show them like, hey, this is mommy or daddy's reading time. The phones are off, the TVs are off. It's just a calm scenario. We don't even have to be reading the same thing, when they get to a certain age. But like what we do for our child, he knows the routine and he gets mad if the routine is messed up. But
Mm-hmm.
it's tubby time, it's PJs, it's teeth, it's 3 books, and then it's bed. That is the routine. So I think
Nice.
it's just that. I think our role is just to be the role models.
That's beautiful, Martina. That is absolutely beautiful. Now, as a slight tangent before I get
Mhm.
into the next question, I want to talk about, from a storytelling point of view, the film Toy Story 5. Saw Toy Story 5 with my family, absolutely loved it. I think everyone, especially families, should go out and see Toy Story 5. Some people will argue it's a subtle remake of Toy Story 1 with Jessie being, the new toy and Lily Pad being the new Buzz. But the message is so very, very powerful. And yes, there have been people who have commented saying that, oh, this film is pushing the stereotype, all technology is bad, that we
Mhm.
should have, you should not have technology and all those other arguments. But from a storytelling point of view, it's also commentary and written in a very engaging way. Now, have you seen the new Toy Story 5? And if so, what was your sort of like thoughts or reactions? Or if you haven't, what do you think from a storytelling point of view ultimately getting that message across?
So I haven't seen it yet. My son has seen it twice with both sets of grandparents. We did not get a chance to go see it. But I've seen some of the trailers, so I kind of had a feeling I knew it was kind of about. Um, and so I think for a story like that, it all boils down to moderation. I mean, just like with anything else, we all eat food. Some eat more than others. We all some of us go to the gym. Some of us go to the gym too much. Like it's
Hmm.
all just about moderation. And so if you're going to do a story like that, I don't think it's necessarily, oh, make the iPad, which I guess is lily pad. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah, don't make the iPad the bad guy. Because it's not that, oh, the iPad is evil for that. I mean, we could have said that about computers. We could have said that about a number of things. It's not that it's evil, it's if you use it too much, just like with anything else.
Yes, very, very true. And I don't want to give too many spoilers for it since you have not seen it, but the story, it's so very, very good because this is actually something that's from the trailer, which is, toys are for playing, and in the same breath, books are for reading.
Mhm.
Technology is everything. It
Yes.
is everything, and it's just such a really powerful movie, and I think that film encapsulates everything that we talked about thus far in this episode of, getting the message across, not playing down, the audience's intelligence, still
Mhm.
being fun and engaging, but also people taking something away from it, the overall message, which is such a good story. And tying it back to imagination, how do you incorporate opportunities for imagination and creativity in your stories while also acknowledging, the influence of digital media? Because as we keep talking about, digital media is very good if it's used in moderation, and it can be used to help with imagination, but again, only in moderation. As you said, if
Mhm.
we use it too much, it's going to overstimulate and it's going to have a very negative effect.
So I think imagination wise, like in my books, my if I was going to describe my books to anyone that didn't know what Bernstein Bears was, I'd say think of Zootopia, but without all the tech. That's kind of the same vibe. You have all these characters, you have, they all live in their own little world. There's so many possibilities of things that could happen in this
Mhm.
world. In the second book, you meet another character called Toby the Tiger. He was kind of a playoff of Tony. Yeah. Funny enough, side note, my illustrator had no idea what I was talking about. So she's from the country of Georgia. And I said, yeah, Toby the Tiger, I want to make him sporty and cool. And she's like, okay. I was like, like Tony the Great. And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I sent her pictures and she goes, no, don't know what that is. I was like, okay, never mind. So it has all of that kind of, whoa, there's a world outside of just Tiny Tail's house. Let's go explore that. PB&J Otter, the same kind of vibe, right? Like you have the boat that they live in, but everyone lives in a boat.
Yes.
So you have like that kind of world. So I think that's the imagination. And then when I go to the schools to go read, I also dress up as Mother Otter. And
Oh,
so
that's
that kind of brings
awesome.
it to life a little bit. And then my husband has like the little fox ears, and
I
so he'll
love
show
it.
up. Yeah, and he's got the big glasses too, but those are his regular glasses, so he's just usually Father Fox without them.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that, Martina. Absolutely. And this next question, I think is also very important because also focuses now on not so much as, the illustrations in a children's book, but also the language in children's
Mhm.
stories as well. And in your opinion, do you think children's attention spans are changing in the digital age? And for authors who are, writing for children, does that impact them in any way?
So I had to do a little bit of research recently. I was part of this group meeting and they were talking about children's books and hey, do we need to essentially dumb them down a little bit? Um, Attention spans are definitely changing. Yes, absolutely. As well as I do that if you put something out on Instagram on a reel, if it's 30 seconds long, it's too long. People
Mm,
just don't sit there for 30 seconds anymore. They're scrolling through. So you always have to have something catchy, something eye grabbing. That's what's happening to our kids. Um, so with that being said, when Berenstain Bears, like the originals were written, they were between 6 to 900 words. Now, when I originally wrote the story, I was close to 1,000. So I had to cut out some things. Nothing like major, mostly adjectives and stuff like that. So the story still stayed the same, just kind of, get rid of all the fluff. Um, but the problem is now my books, so I was able to cut it down to around 800 words. When I talked to another children's author, they made the comment, hey, that still might be too much. The kids might put it
mm,
down. And so I had an option. Either I could cut more out, which meant the story would have to change because the story was perfect at around 800.
right.
So it's either do I dumb it down more and go against what I believe, which is always challenge a child so that's more easily accessible, or do I keep it how it is and challenge the kid? I decided to keep it.
Absolutely.
So, but that was my personal preference.
Very true. Very true. And kind of as, an add-on to this question, do you think there's also a shift when it comes to children's books that, in the past there was like a balance between, the illustration and the dialogue and the prose in the story, but now, especially for certain books in the modern age, where there's more of an emphasis on the illustration and kind of taking away from the prose, that the only thing that's grabbing the kid's attention are the pictures, and the prose may be limited to maybe just 3 to 4 lines, but that maybe just be just speaking. It's not so much as like prose.
Right. So not like a story, more like just the dialogue.
Yes.
I think it all depends. I really haven't seen that shift yet. It doesn't mean it's not there. But I also know like my 2-year-old can't read yet.
Right.
Like we're still working on vowels. So what he's staring at is the pictures. But he also is at that point with certain books that are like his favorite. He knows if you say a word wrong. So they go hand in hand for him. So I can't really say one way or the other. It would make sense if kids gravitate more towards the pictures, but I think they just go hand in hand. Without a good story, your pictures mean nothing. And without good pictures, your words kind of fall flat. But you also have books like The Boy, His Horse, there's like a Fox and the Mole. I don't know if you
know that one.
You don't know that one? It's in the other room. It was made into a TD adaptation, but the illustrations themselves are very simple. I mean, just very simple.
Like, is like Toad and the Frog, or
very similar to that, but think more like calligraphy.
Okay, yes. Now,
so it has like that feel. Yeah, so its shading is very good. The illustrations are beautiful, but they're very simple compared to like what I showed earlier to mine. But it's a different feel. That book is made to be simple, so you focus on the words. Mines are made to be hand in hand. So I think it all just depends on the kind of vibe you're going for.
Absolutely. Now, this next question, I think, is very important. And actually, before we get to that, there's also one other question I really want to hear your thoughts on. And it is something that I have noticed as well. As I'm sure you remember, probably some of the most popular books of like, elementary school and early middle school were the Captain Underpants books. And the subsequent books that came after. I remember reading those books. And I remember there's always been the discussion that books like Captain Underpants don't really help with the reading. But I've seen a lot of children, a lot of students that I've worked with over the years, like that's their favorite book. That's what gets them into reading. And I also remember reading the books of, Ricky Ricotta, where as the mouse, he had a giant mouse robot and they would fight aliens from different planets. I remember those books. Those are so good. So ultimately, what my question is to you, Marteena, is as a parent and, seeing these books that have still remained popular over the years, do you think that books like Captain Underpants can be used to help with a child's early literacy, or do you think they're more of picture books with dialogue, as we've mentioned earlier?
I truly think that any book can be used to teach. And if that is the book series, now it's not my cup of tea, but that's okay. It's not written for me. It's written for other people. And that's fine. We all find something different that we can kind of jive to. So when I was first reading, I stuck a lot with very serious material. Like I read Pilgrim's Progress and Narnia and all the allegories and everything. So I read very serious books. And then someone gifted me a book called A Gentleman Thief Steals a Blanket. It was weird. It was odd. It reminded me of like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but if Sherlock Holmes was like a it's just a rich boy with nothing better to do on his time than to go mess with his rich dad by stealing something of his. And Watson is just along for the ride going, okay. It makes the book itself is so funny. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know books like this existed because I was always given the more serious stuff. But
Absolutely.
anything like Captain Underpants and Magic Treehouse series.
Oh, I love those series.
And the Magic Treehouse was fantastic because they talked about science or history or a certain time period. So they were able to jump through to any kid's imaginations,
And
any
Magic
kids,
School Bus
anything.
too.
Magic School Bus, loved Magic School Bus. So yeah, I think that just kind of encompasses we're all into something different, and that's okay. There's room for everybody in the writing world, I think.
Beautifully said, Martina. Beautifully said. So now I think we may have touched on this, but maybe we can go a little bit more in depth. How did you ensure that, your books sort of stayed up with the times in like the ever-changing digital age? Because I think as authors, when we write our stories, we write them from a different point, in our lives and the world around us. And some people say, your books are dated, they are talking about, things from the past. And there's always been like, that thing with, trends that, authors are trying to write for the trends, but that doesn't really help because you're not really writing to actually help with, the evolution of prose. You're trying to catch a trend. And I think the same thing with even with children's books and YA novels. There's always gonna be a trend, something gonna be very popular, and everybody wants to get there, but they don't do it for the right reasons. So for your Tiny Tale series, how did you make sure that, again, writing in the same style as, the Berenstain Bears and that homage, but having it still be relevant, or what it's talking about is relevant in the digital age that's always, changing and always rapidly evolving?
I think that one. So my books deal a lot with emotions. And so I try to stick with, now the past two have dealt more with fear. This next one deals a little bit more with disappointment. So I think the way that I've been able to work at it is my grandmother, I'm sure she's felt rejection at some point. My mother has felt rejection. I have felt rejection. The feeling of rejection is generational. So by sticking with the emotions and the feeling of, hey, this is the feeling we're going for, I think no matter what day and age it is, it can still help somebody else. If you've ever, there's a book by Bobby Bones called Fail Until You Don't. That's a fantastic book. I love that book. But it goes through his story. Like, I was rejected constantly, kept dealing with this, and this. He wanted to be a radio show host, and every door just kept slamming in his face, so he just kept trying. And so that helps anybody, I would think, now, 100 years from now, whatever anyone is trying to do, and they just keep hitting that wall, that book is going to help them. So maybe radio doesn't exist anymore for whatever reason, but the concept is still there. So I think even if I don't give Tiny Tail an iPad, or, there's floating cars or whatever, because that's not the vibe for these stories, I think it'll still work through generations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of, what you mentioned earlier, whenever you've gone to, the schools to do, readings with these books, what type of activities or discussions do you encourage around your books? Or maybe it's a book that you're given by a teacher to read to deepen, a children's engagement beyond the page.
So far, I've only been able to do school readings that have to do with my book. I'm totally open for any teacher that wants me to dress up and read another book. But typically, the first book deals with a new sibling. So what I try to do is I'll be like, okay, well, how many of you in here are the eldest sibling? How many of you are the baby in the family? How many of you are in between? So that's kind of how I'll open up the discussion. Afterwards, I have a science experiment. So sorry, tying it back to the book. Um, Tiny Tail learns that love is like a seed, and that the more that you plant and nurture it, the more it will grow. And so the activity I have is called rainbow roots. It's a very simple activity. You take a cup, it's see through, and you put some oil and you mix it with food coloring. And when it falls, it looks like roots, like when a plant grows. That's just the
Ah,
easiest one. Now, if they wanted to do something along, like a longer version, the lima beans that you put in the windowsill that make it grow, that's another one. So anything that has to do with plants. For the second book, when I was going around, there's a scene in it that has to deal with bumblebees. And so there's one scene with bumblebees, one scene with a catfish. And so if I wanted to do something sciencey, it would probably be around bumblebees and pollination and how they work. The same thing with the catfish, like just anything aquatic or what the river does and stuff like that. And then discussions for the second book deal more with, well, what's the last time that you faced something that you really didn't know how that was going to go? Now, that's something I still have to deal with. Sometimes, life is just like, hey, you got to go do this thing. You've never done it before. Like this podcast. I've done one podcast with you, but the night before the first one, I barely slept because I didn't know what to expect. And so my brain's just running. So even I still deal with it. But it's just, that's what opens it up and says, hey, even though, yes, I'm older than you, I still feel things like you do. And that's the connection. Let's talk about it.
beautifully said, Martina. Absolutely beautifully said. And we're almost near the end. We just got a few more questions. So I'm actually going to, because some of them are kind of around the same, so I'm actually going to skip some of them. So I'm actually going to go now into the next question, which is feedback. Now, you may have mentioned this in your author interview, but I was wondering if you can go a little bit more in depth on the feedback, particularly from educators who have listened to you read your books to their class, and sort of, that discussion engagement that you had with their students.
So far, the feedback that I've been receiving is pretty positive. Some teachers like the fact that I stop in the middle and I start asking questions. Sure, it takes up a little bit more time, but that's the point. It's kind of the reason why I'm there, is to talk and to, help them. Some teachers, actually all of them so far, have liked the science experiments. They're like, oh my gosh, they were so engaged. And how did you do that? And so I'm like, it's 5 minutes, and they love it. And they asked me to do it again. I'm like, okay. So we dump out the water, we redo it. But most of the time, and this is not a kid appropriate film at all, there is a film that we saw. It was called Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. Have you heard
Oh,
of
I
that?
know the one. Never saw it,
Yes.
but I know it.
It is good for adults. I'm gonna put that out there. There's nothing raunchy. It's just a lot of like blood and gore, because they say it's a horror film. It's not really horror. But there's a scene in it where a teacher is standing in front of a class and all the kids are in their phones, zombified. I mean, just scrolling, 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 scrolling. There's a purpose to it, but I think a lot of teachers feel like that's how their students are, which understandable given the current, obsession with the phones. But they're like standing there going, how am I supposed to teach this class if they're just stuck in their phone? And it's true. I mean, it is hard. It's easier for elementary students because they have to put their phones away if they have them at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think that's just, I mean, the feedback I've gotten is pretty positive. I've gotten them engaged. They like me dressing up. So yeah.
That's amazing, Martina. Absolutely amazing. And now we arrive at the final two questions of this very, very amazing discussion here on this show. Now, this is a very long one, so I'm actually going to I'm going to combine them together because I think they serve really, really well hand in hand. So, the first part of this question, two parts. In what ways do you think your stories or stories like yours can serve as a counterbalance to the constant stimulation of digital devices?
I think, particularly my stories, is rewinding to a simpler time. If you look at the illustrations, like you really look deep, you see there is no cell phone, there are no computers, there's nothing like that. There might be in the future, but there's nothing like that. Everything is more focused on the kid, the toys in the corner, being with the family or with friends or outside. And I think by doing that, it gives kids the idea of, oh, let me go outside and ride my bike because I saw it in a Tiny Tail thing. It's been forever since I've ridden my bike. Or I don't know how to ride a bike. Let me go try, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well said. And the final question, which I think is a good way to, perfectly end this amazing and very important discussion here on the show. What future trends do you anticipate in children's literature as you respond to the challenges posed by overstimulated media? And that could just be devices, that could be TV shows, that could be anything.
I think I'll put it this way. I believe that there is nothing new under the sun. So if we're going to talk about trends, like fads, right? Like the elephant pants and skateboarding, and it's going to come back.
Yes.
So when we were kids, do you remember those PSAs with bullying? Like, it's
Yes.
wrong to bully. And then we had the PSAs about don't talk to strangers even on the
Oh,
internet.
yes.
So I think that all of those will recycle. Like, I don't really see anything new coming out that hasn't been done before. It'll just be a new tweak to it. So instead of bullying, we might see cyberbullying. And instead of the strangers on the internet, well, still, I would say the same thing, like the catfishing, not everyone is who they say they are. The funny one, do you remember, especially in Disney Channel, there was always that episode, no matter which one it was, Mom and Dad are gone for the weekend. We're giving you this emergency credit card.
Yes.
And then they spend it because they don't know how a credit card works. And it's a bunch, like they got all the fancy stuff and then they have to go return it all. Like that was every single series had that one episode. I think that will turn into don't steal mom and dad's credit card information, like putting it online because yada yada yada. So I think those would be kind of the new trends that we see, especially because we grew up with it and we're the ones having the kids now. And so that's what we're kind of expecting for them to go through again.
Absolutely. Well said. I think also to add on to that, I think also, another trend that's going back is a lot of the nostalgia that, as we talked about throughout this episode, I think we're kind of going back to that. I think a lot of people look at the 90s and the early 2000s as like the last two great generations of like the 20th and the 21st, in the beginning of the 21st century, of how, we wrote for children, stories like, books like The Owls of Gahul, The Warriors,
Oh my
Redwall.
gosh, Warriors. Yep.
Yes. All
I
of these
remember
books,
that.
which were written for children, still hold a very powerful thing. I know some of these stories are going to be later adapted into digital media, and that is perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. As we talked about throughout this episode, there is going to be that one thing that gets a child into reading. And also to say, this is not an episode of, condemning digital media or anything like that. This is just a discussion on digital media can be used as a tool, as we've said time
Yeah.
and time again. But if we use it too much, we are going to see the negative effects. And I know I'm also guilty of that. I'm constantly on my phone, even though I'm using it for messages and stuff like that. I have my computer, which I can look on there as well. It's moderation. Ultimately, is what we're talking about. Moderation with devices. And also, reading is therapeutic. It takes us away from
Yes.
everything that we're seeing, and it gives our eyes a rest. It gives our
Mm-hmm.
eyes a rest from the screen. And ultimately, I think a trend that ultimately I would like to see is books that allow children and families to just be that, children and families, just enjoying time together. Much like Marteena's books with the Tiny Tales. I mean, that is primarily what it is. It's just kids, being in their own world, and the families as well. And I think this is a perfect ending to a very, very important and necessary discussion here on the Writers Hub on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to my friend Marteena for coming back on the show and sharing her insights on this very important topic. Now, Marteena, where can people find you on social media again if they want to reach out and connect? And if there are educators or teachers in the audience who are looking for people to read in their schools or libraries, do you have a little announcement for them, a little advertising about your series?
So we can be found at the Adventures of Tiny Tail. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now. You can even find me on LinkedIn under Marteena Drinnen. As far as announcements go, we are officially a part of Once Upon a Bookstore here in Sevierville, Tennessee. Thank you. We are also part of the Golden Goose Marketplace, which is a local group as well. They have a bunch of different local artists of all different kinds. They're really cool to check out, especially if you're visiting from out of town and want to support small businesses. Our website, we are still working on it, but hopefully we can get that up and running. As far as books go, to come reading at your schools, you can find us at tinytailbooks@gmail.com. Or you can message me at 865-280-3338.
Excellent. And if you'd like to know more about Marteena and her journey as an author, I will also link her interview up here for you to watch. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Writers Hub series here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. A huge thank you to my friend Marteena for coming back on the show. And if you would like to see her back again for a roundtable where we have a lot of children's authors or YA authors or a mix of the two, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, everybody, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful Tuesday wherever you are in the world. Take care, and we'll see you all in the next episode.